Hello everyone, this is a good captain and welcome to tutorial video number 2 on the Midway Guadalcanal game system by Avalon Hill. In this video we'll be playing out an entire surface engagement from beginning to end, and I know I stated in the last video that I'd be resolving the Battle of Cape Esperance, but after a couple of test runs I've realized this is a surface combat takes about an hour to do if you do one of these scenarios. So I'm going to go ahead and do the smallest scenario, which is the Battle of Tassafaronga. We can basically cover what we need to cover in a much shorter amount of time and move on to other topics. One thing I want to discuss in regards to rules before we actually get to throwing dice is the night fighting modifier to the Japanese side. It's important to understand, as the Japanese player, this is a huge advantage. I wouldn't say huge. It's a pretty significant advantage if you can take advantage of it, in that throughout 1942, the Japanese were much better trained and generally had better equipment than the Allies did with regards to surface combat at night, and this is reflected in a positive modifier that's used to resolve whether one side has surprised another. And I hopefully will be able to demonstrate the effects of surprise. I think it's better to just demonstrate it rather than go through the rules around it. But just understand that of the 7 operational scenarios that this game system covers, all of which are in 1942, the first 5 chronologically have a Japanese surface modifier of +3. This has the effect of ensuring that 40% of the time that Japanese surface forces engage Allied surface forces, they're going to attain surprise over the Allies. Conversely, only 4% of the time can the Allies expect to surprise the Japanese. Now in this particular scenario, the Japanese night fighting modifier is +2, so there's a 35% chance the Japanese will surprise the Americans, and 9% chance that the Americans will surprise the Japanese. So the first thing we're going to do, just like we would at the top of any surface battle, is roll for sides. Very quickly, I'm going to discuss the American setup. The American side is set up first, and I think the best thing to do, well, this is the way I did it, is put the least mission essential ships up front. So these are the least valuable ships. Each one of these sunk is worth 8 points. Pensacola and the Honolulu are each worth 9. The DD Squadron 9 is worth 14 points, and DD Squadron 10 is worth 6. So I'm trying to protect the high value targets or the weaker targets and place them in the rear, while the stronger ships and the least valuable ships are placed up front. I feel like that's really all the American player can do. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and roll for sides. The Japanese will go first. They roll an 8, and the Americans roll a 1. So the Japanese will be side A. We'll just position that there, and the Americans will be side B. Okay. So on the first turn, when one side has been surprised, there's a pretty severe movement restriction. So surface side B ships normally move first, and that's no change. But what does change is where and how they move. So side B is the Americans. They've been surprised. They're only allowed to move forward 1 space. The American player can do nothing about this. Now the Japanese player gets to move, and there are several options available. First thing we could do is move closer, like so. The benefit of this is that we would get the +2 for torpedoes at half range. This would boost the effectiveness of our torpedo attacks. The negative to this is that the gunnery is, this whole surface thing is sequential, and gunnery comes before torpedoes, so we'd have to eat it pretty hard from these big American cruisers, so I'm not sure that's the best option. And we'd be at half range ourselves, so they'd be very effective guns. The other thing is we could pull away. We could move 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. We open up the range from the smaller guns of the rearward American ships. We also take advantage of the fact that The Japanese torpedoes have a range of 5, and all 3 of these could shoot and hit an individual ship in the center of the American battle line. The problem still, though, is that all 4 American heavy cruisers can hit us as we run away, and the likelihood of us taking some severe damage is pretty great. There is a third option. It's risky, but it can have the payout that we're looking for. And that is a delayed surprise. And in this case, we would be able to move normally on this turn, but we would declare that we're not shooting or firing torpedoes. And as long as as the Japanese side retains side A, we retain the effects of surprise into the next turn. So I'll just quickly demonstrate what this might look like. It means that we could move on down the line, right? Say this is how we wanted to use it. And if we were side A, the Americans would again only move forward 1 space, ducks in a row, and we'd be allowed another turn of movement. In other words, we could position ourselves to torpedo the tail end Charlie, like so. We could do something like this and launch 2 torpedo attacks against the weak last tail end unit of the American battle line. This has the benefit of putting us in a position where we can hit and then truly run away. The New Orleans is completely out of range. The Northampton, the Minneapolis, and Pensacola would still be able to fire if we didn't do something drastic with these other destroyers. But the main thing is, look, this destroyer squadron can get into a position where really nothing can shoot at him except his target. And that looks pretty good. At any rate, this is what we're going to try to do. The target we have in mind is DD Squadron 10, and if we retain surprise, DD Squadron 10 will fall into hex M17. So we want to be in that position 5 hexes away next turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we want to aim for hex R14 with our lead destroyer squadron. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. These 2 guys are not in as advantageous a position as they could be, so we're just going to open up the distance. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this will give him some options on other targets on the following turn. And that's it. That's the end of turn 1. We're going to put all our chips on delayed surprise, and we'll roll for that effect right now. We roll 1d10 for the Japanese, a 4, the Americans a 1. Wow, okay, so yeah, the Japanese retain surface side A, and the Americans retain surface side B. So the American ships will all move forward 1 hex yet again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Unbeknownst to them, there are destroyers lurking in the dark, setting their sights. And we will set up to shoot out of hex R14. 1, 2, like so. This is still not perfect. I mean, we're still going to get hammered by 3 cruisers whose guns have a range of 5 because they're B-level guns. So this little destroyer squadron will get pummeled 3 times. We do have the free roll marker, however, and if this works, we could really get away with it. Okay, so I took a little pause and carefully studied the battlefield here, and yeah, we're going to move Destroyer Squadron 16 here for 1, 2, and we stop here. And that will be we'll line up our shot on DD Squadron 10. And after careful consideration, I'm also going to deploy Destroyer Squadron 17 into R13 and launch torpedoes at DD9, because this is just the most valuable target. If we get lucky and sink that thing, that's 14 points. DD Squadron 10 is worth 6 points. If we get really lucky and sink both, that's 20 points, and I don't think there's any coming back from that for the Americans. And at this point, I'm thinking, in for a penny, in for a pound. So I'm just going to go ahead and 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's no harm in not doing this. This Destroyer Squadron 18 will line up on Honolulu. So that's it. Movement complete. We now go to, and remember that surprise is still in effect. I mean to say, so that movement issue for the Americans is one problem of being surprised. Another problem is this right here. Indicate torpedo fire. Any surface side B ships can fire, and then side A. Well, side B is the American side, but they're still under the effects of surprise, so that they're not allowed this phase. So it goes to the Japanese, and they're going to launch all their torpedoes. Okay. And now comes the first of two interesting moments. We move to the gunnery combats, where the Americans normally shoot first, and then the Japanese would be able to shoot back. But again, the third and final negative to being surprised is that for this turn it's flipped, or for the turn in which you're surprised, it's flipped. Side A gets to shoot first, then side B. So now the whole effect of being surprised comes full circle. It's a triple threat. The movement, the torpedo, and the gunnery are all affected by surprise on the first round, or second in this case if you go for delayed surprise. Now, in this case, the Japanese don't have any guns in range, so they're just going to forfeit their gunnery, and it passes to the Americans. So despite all of this, the Americans will actually be able to have a chance at first blood. And after carefully analyzing the situation, the most no-nonsense approach is to take our best and most threatening cruiser that has the range, the Pensacola, with a surface factor of 3 there, whereas all these other ships have a 2, and aim at since they all have a 2 defense factor, let's just aim at the strongest one. Maybe we get lucky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just in range, so there's no modifiers. It's just the surface factor plus whatever the Americans roll on the dice. Oh, they rolled a whopping 13. And the Japanese rolled a 5, a modified 5. They rolled a 3 plus 2 makes it a 5. So this would be twice as much, which would have this destroyer counter would be flipped. But the Japanese hold the free roll marker, and this may be the moment at which they want to deploy this. This is pretty significant. That's their best destroyer squadron, and 2 more American cruisers have the range on that guy. After carefully reviewing the statistics, there was a 20% chance that that would happen. And so yes, the Japanese will deploy the free roll marker, forcing the Allied side to re-roll that entire combat. The Americans roll again. They roll a whopping 1 this time. The Japanese roll a 4. So the modified attack for the Americans was a total of 4. The modified defense of the Japanese was a total of 6. No effect. But now the Americans hold the free roll marker. Still, I think that was probably worth it, at least for the time being. Minneapolis now brings her guns to bear. There's no reason not to shoot at the same target. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, there is an argument to not do it. If we get any hits, the other ships wouldn't be able to benefit from it. So yeah, let's focus fire on DD-18. Minneapolis shoots at DD-18. We roll the dice. It's a 3. Add the surface factor to make a 5. The Japanese roll a dice back. They roll a 4 for a total of 6. No effect. Northampton now shoots at the same target with the same modifiers. They roll an 8, which pumps up to a 10, and the Japanese roll a 2, which modifies to a 4. This is double. This unit would be flipped, but it can't be. It's already flipped, so it's destroyed instead, and its torpedoes are removed from the board. A quick look at the chart here shows that the Americans gained 7 points for sinking a half squad of destroyer squadron, flipping destroyer squadron 17. So that was 7 points awarded to the Americans, and the Americans are now officially winning the game. The last ship to fire is New Orleans, and we'll shoot at DD-17 there. rolls a 3, modifies to a 5, and the Japanese roll a 3 back, which also modifies to a 5. So that's it. Okay, the game is on now, because after gunnery is torpedo combat, and this is pretty straightforward. The only torpedoes on the map will track, including the hex that they were deployed in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our best chance of doing damage. This is we have a torpedo factor here of 6. Okay, of 6 here. And what modifiers do we qualify for? This is pretty important. We get the torpedoes used at night. This represents the inability at night to see torpedo wakes and increasing the effectiveness of torpedo attacks. So 6 becomes an 8. We roll a dice, we roll a 6. This becomes a 14. The American defense factor is 2. Let's zoom in. The Americans roll a 10, which modifies up to a 12. The best chance of doing real damage has flubbed for the Japanese here. And the DD-10 is marked with a hit. There's one more chance to do some crippling damage here, or to do any kind of real damage here. DD-17 tracks its torpedoes, 5 hexes into hex M16 there, and hopefully slamming into DD9. Let's see what happens. We have a 3 this time. We still get the +2 for torpedoes at night, making it a +5. We roll a D10, which pumps it up to 8. Not great, but let's see what the Americans roll. They roll a 7, which goes up to 9, and yeah, that's the end of that. That's a greater than, so no damage. So all Japanese ships have fired torpedoes, and we really didn't have much to show for it. It was a good try, but American gunnery outdid and brute force outdid what I thought were clever tactics on the part of the Japanese. So at this moment, the Americans have 7 points, and they have the distance they need to try to start opening up the distance so that they don't receive any more damage from any of these destroyers to win the game. So I'm going to very quickly kind of accelerate. We're going to finish this game, yes, but I really want to show what breakoffs look like. So let's go ahead and advance the turn to turn 3 and roll for sides, since this is no breakoffs are allowed before turn 3 or before turn 4 here. So the Japanese roll a 2 and the Americans roll a 2, so we'll have to re-roll that for sides. The Japanese roll a 7 and the Americans roll a 4. So the Japanese will retain side A and the Americans will retain side B, which means the Americans will move first. And at this point, it's just silly not to disengage from an enemy that's so far away while you're winning. So 1 to click, change direction, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and all the way down the line in this fashion. Okay? Why am I doing this? Again, we're winning. We sank 2 Japanese destroyers. That counts for 7 points. We haven't lost any points in return. And the Japanese are so far away and have expended their ammunition, let's not give them any chance by closing the distance to use their guns. Meanwhile, the Japanese will do their best to give chase. 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's be a little bit smarter about this. Let's go around the edge. 1, 2, 3 to avoid the gunfire. Perfect. 1, 2, 3. But really, there's no way to close on any of the American ships if they do this. So no shots fired. We roll over to turn 4, and now we can finally demonstrate how ships can disengage, and otherwise be pulled off the map and placed back into their task force boxes. Okay. So the Japanese roll a dice, a 3. The Americans roll a dice, a 1. So the Japanese will be side A yet again. So side B will go first. They will simply move away from the Japanese. Okay. And then it's the Japanese turn, and they just can't. There's no way to give chase here. So this would be the point where honestly you would just 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. You would just you know, this would be the end game. You don't need to play this out. I'm just going to do this right now to demonstrate how you would try to break off ships. So let's say you're playing an operational scenario and there's more ships in the fray right now. Ships are still shooting at each other. Well, on any turn you can do this because it's part of the sequence. You can, after torpedo combat, you can move to breakoffs. And first, surface side B designates any breakoff ship units, and in that case, that's the U.S. player. The U.S. player is currently winning this battle, so this is something they would like to do. And then what the bottom line up front is that you want to roll higher than your opponent. So the Americans will make a dice roll with a D10. They rolled a 5, and the Japanese will roll. They roll a 10. I'm sorry, yeah, so the way this works, it needs a little bit more explanation. So ships that have a open water hex in all 6 of their adjacent hexes would roll singly. However, if there are any ships adjacent, the roll applies to every ship in this row here. This forms a group. In other words, they'll either all break off together or none of them will. And the way you do this is roll 2 dice as we've just done, and there's only really 2 modifiers. You get a -5 if it's at night, and a +1 for every completed turn. So in this situation, we've completed 3 turns. So we have a +3, but it's -5 for trying to break off at night. The net is a -2. So the Americans rolled a 5, which modifies to a 3, and the Japanese rolled a 10. If the dice had been reversed, and the Americans rolled the 10 and the Japanese rolled the 5, then the entire fleet would just be taken off the board and placed back in their task force box, thus ending the battle. So that concludes the Battle of Tassafaronga. I know it's a little, might not have been what you expected. Just believe me when I say that most of these surface battle games are way more complex. And in fact, this is why I chose this battle, because it's so small and so simple. We can get through it in however long it's been. What has it been? About 20 minutes or so. Most other battles take an hour or more, and I didn't want to do that to my listeners. So I think this demonstrated all of the sequences in a naval combat turn, as well as some of the nuances in the rules. In real life, the Battle of Tassafaronga played out quite differently than this one did. Here, the Japanese lost 2 destroyers. The Americans arguably lost a single destroyer. But yeah, the Americans definitely won by game turn standards. So thanks for watching this. All the best from the good captain. Hope to see you in the next tutorial, and bye-bye.